of Castlebar, who started off in politics around 1960, giving the usual speeches from the back of a lorry outside church gates. And he carries, I think he carries his immense responsibilities with great dignity and great aplomb, and indeed a great sense of humour, because he's always on for a laugh. Would you give a warm welcome to the EU Commissioner for Employment and Social Affairs, Pádraig Flynn. Here he is, big fella. Oh, you're too big. You're too big. How are you? Come in and sit down. Come in and sit down. There you are. Oh, oh, yes, you're laughing now, P, but narrow escape yesterday. Did you get the shock of your life? You were nearly gone, you and the rest of the gang.
Survived it once again.
Survived it once again. You're used to survival. Were you frightened?
Not at the very end, because they didn't have the numbers. And I think I knew from my experience in the past that the numbers were not going to be there for the vote of censure. But that wasn't really the real problem we had. The problem was going to be the resolution. And the first resolution would have been very difficult for the Commission to live with, because it, in fact, it made it quite clear that we were culpable of mismanagement. And it also named 2 commissioners who had to resign, and it put a lot of demands on us that would have been impossible for us to meet. Now, at the end of the business, of course, that was put forward by the Conservatives and by the Greens and by the Liberals.
But did the others get a fright, Pete? Did they think they were gone?
I think we might have all had a few frights over the last couple of weeks.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, it was quite clear that the members of the European Parliament did not want to sack the college as a whole,
yes,
and the whole 20 of us.
And the old dog for the hard road, you could count the numbers like you did in Castlebar on many occasions.
Well, I did them in Castlebar and a few other places up in town here too on a few occasions, and got them right on a few occasions and not so right on a few other occasions.
But you got them right on this occasion.
I had them right here, that they didn't have the numbers, but it was very important what they were trying to do. You see, they're gearing themselves up for the European elections in June.
Yes.
So this was a test in advance of those elections to show their mettle. Yes. And also they want to get more power. Let's be clear about
the MEPs you're talking about.
The MEPs want to get more power. The only way they can have power is through the treaty. That's where we get our power from, the Commission. But they want to get more control over the Commission, because we are the big power brokers. We're the ones with the right of initiative under the treaty. Yes. So what they have to do, if they cannot get it in the treaty, they can only test themselves against the Commission.
It's been a long time coming, the stories of corruption.
Yes,
and
no, and listen, I tell you,
the Euro gravy train.
And this has been brewing for a little while as well, for the last couple of years. And in fact, a lot of people thought there was going to be a vote of censure long before this. Now, it came to the crunch last December when the vote of discharge was taken on board. Now, that's to clear the accounts for 1996. The discussions were going on for 9 months. They weren't prepared to do it because they said there was some mismanagement. And consequently, we put down a declaration to say, if you don't give us a discharge for the 1996 accounts, then sack us.
Right.
We put the challenge up to them. They didn't want it, and it was quite clear from the very start that the vast majority did not want to sack the Commission, but they wanted to get a much more open and a much more accountable regime and an independent way of dealing with fraud.
But what about poor unfortunate Mr. Booten, who pulled the plug and blew the whistle? That man has been suspended.
Yes. He wasn't suspended now by the Commission as a whole. He was suspended by his Director General. And he was suspended because he had leaked documents that were confidential, and some of those documents were before the courts for the court cases in some of the fraud cases that we were talking about.
But P, I would expect you, a man of probity and integrity and upstanding nature always, to threaten to resign if this man is not reinstated.
No, I'm not going to resign.
Never resign.
Oh, no.
Never resign, no. Well, I tried. Poor Mr. Booten. Yes.
No. I'm not going to resign, but they have the authority. The Parliament has the authority to sack us, but they can't sack individual commissioners. You can only sack the whole Commission as a whole.
I know that,
they would like to be able to sack individual commissioners if it's found that they have not done the job.
I'm talking about Mr. Booten.
No, well, Mr. Booten now has been suspended.
Yes.
His case will go before a disciplinary committee, and if he's found wanting, then he's in trouble. So if not, he can be reinstated.
You're not going to threaten to resign if he's not
reinstated? I am not, but I think perhaps you might very well be right that he might be very well reinstated in some other job other than in the auditing area.
I see. So he'll lose face at least, yes. But are you all without sin, P, now? Are you all without sin in this whole thing?
What kind of sins are you talking about now,
All sorts of sin. I'm talking about all sorts of sin. All sorts of sin.
Well, insofar as management of the funds are concerned, you mentioned before I came in that I have a budget of $9.25 billion. A lot of money. And I have about 750 people working for me. Now, I have responsibility for 45 budget lines. And when I went there first, there was a lot of difficulty with the major fund that I have. That's the social fund, the 9 billion fund. So I decided to set up a new structure in my directorate, a budget structure, a control structure, and an evaluation. Now, I've only about 55 people doing it. And the reason is because at the very start, I said to the Director General, if you find something wrong, you've got to deal with the person who is wrong, sack them, suspend them, or whatever. Because if you don't, I'm going to sack you. And the reason is quite simple. If I didn't, I'm gone.
You're head on.
So
right.
I think, and I also did something else. I started to go down to the Parliament on a regular basis and send my top officials down to explain to them what was going on. Because a lot of the money, of course, most of it, in fact, is spent in the member states. And we have people who carry out investigations, one thing or another. The Court of Auditors had drawn attention to some difficulties in my own fund. That has changed now, so much so that in the 1997 Court of Auditors, I was pleased to see that they said that the social fund, under my control, was the best managed fund.
Clean as a whistle.
No, not clean as a whistle, but the best managed fund and a role model for the other funds.
But do you think, generally speaking, Pete, there's a huge amount of waste and a lot of corruption going on?
Not a lot of corruption,
waste.
but there is a certain amount of waste and certain amount of mismanagement. And I'll tell you why. We don't run services. We run programs. 90 billion a year is spent by about 15,000 civil servants. Now, it's not running services, it's giving it out in grants and programs all over the world. And we do not have the staff to run these programs ourselves. So we contract in outside consultants. And we have found that some of these consultants, there are huge weaknesses there, and we send in people to examine them. When we find mistakes, we stop the payments. But I have to say to you, some money does go astray.
Okay, now, you do all of this off your own bat. You have immense power, Pete. You have immense power. Haven't you? Yes, you have.
The Commission is a very powerful, it's a very powerful institution.
You as the Commissioner have immense power. You are a pretty solo runner in all of this sort of thing.
Well, we set the agenda. And insofar as social affairs and insofar as employment policy is concerned, no initiative can be taken unless I put up the proposal. That's the source of the power.
That's the source.
Now, I have to convince my colleagues, the other 19 commissioners, that what I'm suggesting is the right thing to do. And then it goes to the European Parliament, the 626 of them.
My God, yes.
Well, there was only 552 of them there for the vote the last day. Some 70 to 80 didn't appear, but that you can talk about that again. Well, whatever. Now, and then it goes to the Council of Ministers.
Yes.
So we propose, but the Council of Ministers and the Parliament finally decide.
But getting back to you, do you love it?
Yes.
You love the power.
Well, I don't know what's the sense of power, but you get the
power.
opportunity at this level of doing something substantial and leaving something behind you. Now, it's a question of motivation. And in politics, you know, there are two types of politicians, really. Front runners and safe people. Now, in a government like here, you have to get the balance right. Because if you have too many front runners, they keep knocking the fences and you're in trouble. The safe people keep everything nice and even. So you've got to get the balance right. Now, the front runners, they're motivators. But of course, they take terrible risks because they identify problems and they try and put the solutions in place as against the ideological
And you're
attitude.
a front runner.
You've said it.
You're a front runner. And that's the way you like to be.
Well, it's the way the excitement
Come back home for a moment. What are you going to do about the Flood Tribunal and the 50 grand, Gilmore?
Well, I want to tell you about that. I've said my piece about that. In fact, I've said too much because you can get yourself in the High Court for undermining the tribunal. So I ain't saying no more about this except to say just one thing, and this is all I'll say. I never asked or took money from anybody to do favours for anybody in my life.
But you know Gil Martin.
Oh, yeah.
You know Tom Gilmore.
Yeah. I haven't seen him now for some years.
I see.
I met him. He's a Sligo man who went to England, made a lot of money, came back, wanted to do a lot of business in Ireland. Didn't work out for him. He's not well. His wife isn't well, and he's out of sorts.
But you're saying you never took money from anybody at any time for any reason?
I never took money from anybody to do a political favour insofar as planning is concerned.
How upset were you with the allegations about Beverly?
Very.
Very.
My daughter?
Yeah.
Oh, very. Yes, I was. I was upset, and I think I was angry because I felt that here was a young backbencher in my political party who was being attacked pretty unfairly from my point of view. And some of it was because she was Pádraig Flynn's daughter. I hated that. And we're a terribly close-knit family, and, you know, she's a class act. Look, in comparison to me, she'd leave me standing.
As a politician?
She will leave me standing if she gets a fair chance at it. I know that. And we're terribly proud of her, and I certainly would like to defend her, but she's going to be proved right, and she's going to have a good career, and I think she's good for Dáil Éireann, and I think she's going to make an excellent politician, and I wish her luck.
You were upset?
Yes.
You were upset.
Oh, yes. Oh, are you kidding? About my own daughter being attacked unfairly as I saw it? Well, what would any father? Of course I was upset, and I'm still upset about it, so don't draw me on it, please. Except to say that I want to tell you something. She has the full support of not just me and Dorothy and the family, but friends in the media too, I have to say to you, and in Dáil Éireann. All my old friends have come to support her. And really, what do I say about my own daughter? Look, she's a class act and she's going to be a terrific politician.
And she's denied the allegations, of course.
Oh, yes, of course. And that's all going to come up in another way. And I hope that everything will be sorted out to everybody's mutual satisfaction. And if you're listening in, Beverly, you know where your dad's.
She is listening in, of course she will be. Yes, sir. Come on, join in by all means. You're welcome.
MEPs make an annual salary of, I think, 35 grand, plus they can make anything up to 200 grand a year in expenses. Is it the same for commissioners?
Well, I don't know how much exactly they get, but you're quite right that they do get the same salary, the starting salary, as a TD would get here at home, right? Then they get expenses for going...
Close to 5 times that.
Oh, yes, they get expenses for going over and back. I don't know exactly what it is. As far as I am concerned, I get, give or take, it works out at about, with expenses, 140,000 a year, and I pay 30.3% tax on that, so it's about a net 100,000. And out of that 100,000, I run a home in Dublin, Castlebar, and Brussels. I want to tell you something. Try it sometime when you have a couple of cars and 3 houses and 3 homes and a few housekeepers, and I want to tell you and everything else. But remember, it's a well-paid job. It's a well-paid job. About 100,000 a year net.
Running 3 houses. Do you need 3 houses?
Well, I have to live somewhere.
In Brussels, yes. And then Dublin.
Yes,
and
Castlebar. Yeah.
So you're in
and don't forget, it's a very interesting thing, and I know very well that the families here will understand this, that even though you're not living in a house, if you're coming back to it every month, you have to heat it and light it and do all the other repairs on it. So the only thing that's different is the price of the food. Okay. So it's a very expensive business.
Well, rising out of that, you've come a long way, P, haven't you?
Oh, yeah. Listen, I've had a charmed...
beginnings.
Yes, and I've had a charmed political existence. I started off...
Do you think so? Do you think
so?
Yeah,
of course I have. Listen, I had choices all along the way. I was doing very well in business, of course, when I went into politics originally, and I was elected to Mayo County Council in 1967. And from that, I went to Dáil Éireann in 77. I was a minister at 80, and I've been there or thereabouts the top ever since. Look, and I'm the commissioner in Europe. I mean, listen, I've had a wonderful political career, and I've had the support of my people, my family, and my friends, all during that time.
And do you love living in Brussels?
Brussels, I think if you asked Dorothy that, she would say to you, I love it. Because I think, really, if Dorothy hadn't wanted to stay there, I wouldn't have stayed unless she was happy. Because I spent most of my life, a quarter of a century, commuting up and down to Dublin here. And really, Dorothy reared the children and looked after everything. And I just felt that the time had come when at least we should be together. And she's with me in Brussels. She loves it. Gets on great with all her friends there. I'm busy. Now, you must remember that I spend 2-3 days a week only in Brussels. The rest of it, I have to travel around to the other 14 member states, America, Japan, and other places like that. Last year, I'll give you an example. I took 164 aeroplane flights. The year before, 150 odd. So it works out about 150 aeroplane flights a year, traveling all over the world, and 2 or 3 days a week, every week in Brussels. So I don't see an awful lot of Brussels, to be quite honest with you. But it's a nice town, and I want to say it has wonderful restaurants and some very interesting places to go.
Well done for having the courage to hold up your hand. Yes, sir. You're welcome.
I come from a working class neighbourhood in Dublin, and I've grown up most of my life with tribunals and different scandals going on, and the corruption in Ireland, like with senior politicians being investigated for bank fraud. And now I've really been let down by Europe, saying that Europe is now corrupt. What future have we got?
No, I don't want you to believe that Europe is corrupt. What I want you to understand about the situation about mismanagement is this, that when you're spending 90 billion a year, and it's been spent all over the world, obviously there will be miscalculations and things will go astray, but you have to find out as best you can how to correct that. Now, there is nobody charging any of the commissioners with corruption. They made that quite clear. What they were being charged with was mismanagement.
Come on, Edith Cresson allegedly hired her 70-year-old dentist to assess EU spending on AIDS recently.
Well, I want to tell you something. I don't know the full details about that, but the interesting thing about that is, as part of the bargain between the European Parliament and the Commission in the 14 votes in the vote of censure that took place this week, part of that deal is that a special committee now is being set up of what they call... No, well, it's wise people. It's not from the Commission, the Parliament and the Court of Auditors. And before the 30th of March this year, they're going to report back in depth on all of these allegations. And it has been agreed by us that if any of these allegations stand up, then...
Heads are going to roll.
Heads are going to roll.
Come back to yourself in Brussels.
This gentleman, I want to say to you...
the last thing I wanted to say was...
Sorry, if I may interrupt, you mentioned about tribunals. Now, I've been round a little while as well, and I want to say to you, and Gail remember this, and so will many of you here in the audience, you remember all the other tribunals.
Beef.
The Betelgeuse.
Betelgeuse.
Down in Bantry Bay.
Yes, you were
the Kerry Babies.
Yes.
The Bushivant train disaster.
Yes.
And, yes, the beef tribunal, and all of those. They cost enormous sums of money. And what I'm saying is, I think perhaps there should be a cheaper way of carrying out these investigations without having them drag on for years. And in the end of the day, are there new structures put in place to match up whatever problems exist?
Well, that's the fault of the politicians if there isn't.
Well, the politicians set up these tribunals.
Yes,
but I have to say to you that in my opinion, they really can be very debilitating on the political system, and people get browned off an awful lot with them.
Okay.
So I say there should be a quicker way of doing the business if it could be found.
Well, Pádraig, I'm not talking about the Kerry Babies or things like that. I'm talking about a lot more serious things which affect the day-to-day lives of people in Ireland and in Europe. Now, why is it that the working class people, which are the main taxpayers in the country, why are they the ones who have to pay for all these tribunals? It's quite clear to us, the people of Ireland, that these people are guilty, but nobody gets prosecuted.
Well, first of all, when a tribunal sits, it makes recommendations, and if people are found guilty of something, they can be prosecuted. But you're quite right when you say that any tribunal set up by Dáil Éireann has to be paid by the taxpayers.
That's right.
That's right. No question about that.
In our eyes, and like, I live in Finglas in Dublin, and listening to people around me in work, like, yous are criminals to us.
No, that's...
But that's...
Not P.
They're more sophisticated criminals. They might not have a balaclava and a gunman they're robbing.
Well, when you see what's happening in America, and you see what's happening in Europe now, and you see what's happening in... There is some effort to clean up the act, isn't there? There is a general cleansing going on. It may take a long time.
And that's what all this argument in the European Parliament is about too. Trying to get a much more open and accountable system.
There's a lovely young lady... Oh, sorry, I'll take a phone call first. What line? Line 4. Hello, line 4. Good evening.
Good evening, Gay.
Yes.
Pat Cox MEP here.
Oh, hello, Pat Cox.
I'm sorry that I'm suffering, or I'm hopefully coming out of a dose of laryngitis.
I hear that.
I just come in the door to my home from Strasbourg, having spent a full week out there since last Sunday night.
And there's P. Flynn on the Late Late.
And Shin Deireadh Kind of thought to a P.
Very good, Pat. And I want to take... Sorry, you're going to say something, Pat?
He was, yes.
Because I want to say about Pat Cox, he greatly enhanced his reputation during the last few weeks. He was the one who put down the first resolution naming the 2 commissioners that Gay referred to, OK? But he never had it as part of his strategy. And you're listening into this, Pat, so you can say it's right or wrong. I believe that you never had as a part of your strategy to sack the commission as a whole, or indeed to sack individual commissioners. What you wanted to do was to get a situation where in the future the possibility would be created in the next treaty arrangement that it would be possible to have individual accountability by individual commissioners.
Laryngite to us, Pat. What do you say to that?
Bottom line on this, Kay.
Yeah.
Europe is getting, as we know, because we keep reading it every day about the tax breaks and the various other issues going on, more and more intrusive into the day-to-day life of people in Ireland.
It certainly is.
It's becoming more and more what I might call governmental in our day-to-day lives in its influence.
Yes.
As it does that, it must, for Europe, do what we do here already with the Dáil in Ireland, with Westminster, with the House of Commons and so on, with the Assemblée Nationale in France, and that is take the executive being P. Flynn and the commissioners in this case, and hold them accountable to public accountability before the bar of public accountability and democratic control, which is a democratically elected parliament. This week marks a sea change in the relationship between the parliament and the commission. Why? Because this week the parliament empowered itself, not because it's in the treaty, and Pádraig Flynn is right, but because it's in our mind that Europe has become so politically important, that the commissioners have so much political power, that gone is the day when the commissioners can hide behind the shield of the treaty, which says they have collegiate or collective responsibility. When everyone is responsible, no one is responsible.
That's right.
In politics, and I don't know, was it FDR or who it was said in the United States, the buck must stop somewhere. You can't have buck passing. That's what bureaucrats do. In politics, you need accountability. My group, the Parliament, this week, put down a marker. If you believe that Europe is becoming more political, whatever its constitutional finality, if you believe that Europe deserves to be treated in a serious political way, if you believe, as I believe, that Pádraig Flynn and his colleagues in the Commission are a powerful, important political body, and not merely, as Margaret Thatcher used to dismiss them, as appointed bureaucrats, then as politicians,
they must be controlled.
Must stop with them. They must be accountable before the bar of public accountability in a parliament on the record, and the rot of irregularity, of mismanagement and of fraud, which, by the way, and Pádraig has said right, on the record of the House, as a man who named names and who invited the two named people in the Commission to sit in my group with me, who looked them eye to Madame Edith Cresson, eye to Commissioner Manuel Marin. I told them, and Pádraig knows this, I was not, my group was not, the Parliament was not accusing them individually and personally of corruption or fraud. But what we did say, and this is the important point of this week, when you are in charge, when you have the privilege for the citizens of Europe of managing European affairs, you personally should be politically accountable in a democratic way for your stewardship. That's the bottom line of this week. It's good for Europe, for the Commission, for the Parliament, for democracy, for people, for the taxpayer. I'm proud that the Parliament said to the Commission, we treat you seriously as a political body. I'm proud that the Parliament shook the cage and said to the Commissioners, to hell with this notion of the shield of collectivity. I said for
very
my
good,
group,
Pat. I have to leave you there, Pat. For a fellow with laryngitis, you're doing very well.
Could I just say one thing to Pat?
Say one thing to Pat.
All right.
Say one thing to Pat there, yeah.
Pat, I have no difficulty with what you say about being accountable. That's not a problem for me at all. And as you quite rightly say, it is not provided for in that way just now in the treaty. So consequently, you either sack the lot of us or you can't sack us individually. But I was disappointed, Pat, with one thing that happened with you this week. It was that you had made it quite clear to everybody in your contributions that you are not interested in sacking the whole commission. But at the end of the day, you voted for the censure on the lot of us. I was disappointed with that, and I can't know what changed your mind.
Okay.
But I have to say to you that the vast majority of the other MEPs from Ireland recognise the very important relationship there has to be between a small member state and the powerful commission in the interests of small member states, and they voted not.